pane machallenges atinosangana nawo, pane zvimwe zvinhu zvinorwadza zvaunoexperience, but it is up to you to allow those things, to allow those situations, or even to allow people who say negative things up to you to define who you are. If anyone is a great person, it is a person who comes from God. No one will come and do it to you. Sometimes even people might come to you and say certain things that might get into you. But don't allow it to get into your head. Because also what people say sometimes doesn't necessarily define who you are. Hello family, welcome to this week's edition. I hope you guys have been doing well and you had a great week. So I think 2 days ago, I had an interesting conversation with another colleague of mine. He experienced a huge blow or setback in his academic and professional progression. And we ended up having a chat, and some of the things that I shared with him, I think today I was pondering on the things that I shared with him. And I was like, wow, I have to share some of those things with you. I believe some of you will actually find it useful and helpful. And these things that I'm going to talk about are just the hurdles and the setbacks that we face along the journey, irregardless of your area of focus. There are just some things which transcend your area of focus, so it applies to, across the sphere. Those are the things that I'm going to share. And these things are the things that I experienced personally along my journey. And like I have said, I think in the first episode, I'm just one person who would spend most of my time studying myself. And also, I do keep records for history. I try as much as possible to connect the dots. Why did this happen? Sometimes I might not have the answer, but over time I would need to have answers and I would need to connect the dots. So I'm going to share some of those things because I've seen that most of the people, when we encounter among situations, but it doesn't mean that certain situations define you, or what some people say to you define you. So let me start with this. When I was doing my O-level, Taimo sciences, but each and every day, I would clearly tell and feel that calling is, in life there are pull and push factors. I would have those push factors from my sciences, and I would feel pulled towards the commercials. So when I finished my O-level, I actually took a breath and said, thank God, I'm now shifting from this science space and transitioning to the commercial space. So Form 5, I started doing my commercials. That was the year that I started doing accounting. That was the year that I started doing business studies. I could feel, this is one of the best decisions that I have made. Internally, I would feel at peace. This is now my area of calling. But first term, I went home, I felt dismally. And at some point, I cried. Why are things happening in this way? But what I did, I sort of like picked two gentlemen who did well in this path and in this area that I had chosen to work in. And both of them were doing their degree at the University of Zimbabwe. So they were day scholars, and then come back around 5, 6. So we all agreed that they would help me out in my accounts and my business studies from around 6. Sometimes I would take an hour, sometimes I'd take 2 hours. And those gentlemen were helping me. So when you're doing your law, I was at boarding school. So this was the first term. I could clearly tell that my parents had sacrificed all that they had to buy me uniforms and just making sure that everything that I needed, I would have it. So one of the days on holiday, before I had gone, we'll call them my extra lessons, right? My extra lessons to get assistance from this gentleman. I said, no, let me do my thorough cleaning. And I washed all of my clothes, the uniforms, and even the clothes that were at home. So the only remaining clothes that I did not wash were the ones that I was actually wearing. So nguva yasvika for me to go to the lessons around 6. I left the clothes on the line. Ndikaenda kuma lessons. I finished around 7:30, 8, and I came back. Sapa ndakadzoka, I was tired, and I forgot that I had hembe dziri panze dzandandayanika. And what happened? I slept only to recall in the morning, I left some clothes on the line. When I went to check, there were only some pegs remaining, hembe dzese dzakanga dzatorwa dzatobiwa over the night. The pain I felt, and even the questions I had to ask God, panguva iyoyo ndakashaya ma-answers, and nothing could come to give me an answer at that time. I was hurt. Kuti hembe dzandasarwa nadzo ndo dzandakapfeka, ndo hembe dzandakupfeka pamba, ndo hembe dzekufambisa. That's all I had. And I didn't even know kuti saka second term ndichaita say, where am I going to get money to buy the new clothes? Already you could tell and you could know the situation at home. Kuti mari school fees and rubhadharwa, these are all sacrifices, and they are actually sacrificing kuti vazowana school fees for the next term. But having said all of that, what happened? I went back kuchikoro with only one pair of, I think, a shirt, a trouser, and ironically, nobody could tell. If anything, I was one of the most well-dressed young men at our school. But ndaita zvekuti zuva rapera, I would watch my clothes. Dzisati dzatooma, I would take and I would iron just to make it look presentable. But I would wear one shirt and one trouser for the whole of the term. These were some of the hurdles. Andina kuwa na answer panguva iyoyo. But I think 3 years, 4 years after, I was the youth chairman at our church before I got married. For a couple of years, actually. There was a lady who walked to me and she said, Chairman, she was crying. And I said, what's wrong, my sister? And she said, you know what? Mumba mati nogara, everything got bent, including hembe dzangu dzese. And the hembe dzanangosarwa nadzo, these are the only ones that are remaining, that I have. I don't know what to do. Why could this happen to me? And it only took that moment for me to ponder. It dawned on me, what this sister of mine is telling me is exactly the same situation that I've been in when I was at my lower 6 first term during the holiday, when all of my clothes got stolen, and I felt like, and this is in a, you know, when you are in that particular situation, you feel like the world has collapsed on you. And that's when I realized God made me to go through this so that I could be of help to this sister. Then this Nakita go through what I had gone through. How was I going to help her? And at that moment I had to sit her down and say, no, my sister, what you're going through, I have personally gone through the same situation. And I had to narrate the whole story. And in turn, I also had to tell her, look at me now today. You see, I now have a lot of hembetse kutochinjanisa. But that has not been the case in my lower 6. So my sister, don't worry. I know and I can tell the pain that you have right now. But don't feel like it's all doom. This is just a situation which is temporary. It's not permanent. Don't allow it to make you feel any type of way. It's normal for you to feel what you're feeling, but who knows? Maybe a month, 2 months, 3 months from now, you're actually seeing yourself walk to it. I say, gradually, improving wana hembedze kukwanisa kuchinjanisa. So don't let that got into your mind and make you feel like there is no way out of this. That was the first issue. The second issue is, when I was at school, I had people who would come to me to just make me feel less of a human being. These people would come to just to belittle me. I hope you can see I'm dark, right? But some people would come and call me nugget. You know that shoe polish written nugget. And some people would say, the way you're worried, the way you're so dark, you're nugget. And people actually calling me nugget, you know. Those things at that moment would get into me. And to some point, in all honesty, I mean, I have nothing against all of those people who said anything to me during that time. But some people, they don't even know. You know, sometimes the devil uses people just to demean you or just to make you sort of like lose confidence in yourself, and so that you just don't end up becoming who God entails for you to become. Because partly at some point that got into me and affected even my confidence during that high school. But I thank God, because as I evolved and as I had to grow spiritually, you know, I began to ask God to reveal me to me, so that I get to know who I am according to God's blueprint. But having said this, you know, I'm just trying to point out a figure to say, you see, sometimes even people might come to you and say certain things that might get into you. But don't allow it to get into your head. Because also what people say sometimes doesn't necessarily define who you are. And in all honesty, right now, Pandiri Panapa, if you want to judge in, I don't know, whatever criteria you might need to judge, those people, by those times, they would see themselves as they are the guys. But right now, currently as it stands, I'm way above all of them. Anyone who belittled me during those days and seeing themselves as nobody pamsoro, this was the person. But right now, whether be it spiritually, whether be it physically, materially, I'm above most, if not all of them, by the grace of God. So don't worry about if anyone is a great person and is a person who comes from God, no one will come and belittle you. If anyone is a great person and is a person who comes from God, no one will come and belittle you. Person is a lesser. Why should a person be intimidated by you or want to say any negative things to you? Great people actually don't do that. Then the last thing is, when I wrote my A levels, I delayed even going to university because I didn't have money. You're going to university. And I had to go and work for a year. And do you know what I was doing for that particular year? I was a cleaner. I was a cooker. And Pabasa Pandai Shanda Vandai, you know, you'll be required to be the first person to arrive Pabasa. You clean my tables, I have my desks and everything. I would make prayers. My computer, one day it should be me. Operator. When I was cooking, and some of them, I shouldn't say, I didn't mind in, you know, simply because I would come in, I would cook for them. And by all standards, they felt like they had that justification of looking down upon me, of laughing at me. But in myself, I knew, no, it's just a season and it's just a time. Let me enjoy, let me go what I had to go through this particular season. A year passed. But look, man, after that year, I got to go to university. I got to pursue a degree that I believed it was aligned to my calling. Was everything easier throughout the process? No. Didn't I face my hurdles? No. I had to face whatever hurdles that I had to face. But look, that very same guy, Ainz Nugget, that very same guy who was belittled a year after, it's far-fetched because I ended up doing something that was completely different, but I didn't lose sight of what I wanted out of my life. I ended up doing what I wanted. And by the grace of God in my class, I was the only person who graduated with a first-class degree. How then can you intermarry all of these events and how things eventually panned out. This is only to say, in life, pane ma-challenges atinosangana nawo. Pane zvimwe zvinhu zvinorwadza zvaunoexperience. But it is up to you to allow those things, to allow those situations, or even to allow people who say negative things to you to define who you are. As long as you do not allow anything to get into your head, whatever that is happening today, it's temporary, doesn't define you. So, in all honesty, let me end here. In the next video, we'll talk, breaking down some of the things that I have highlighted deeper, and also sharing with you why I also sort of like believe in grace. Okay? Because there are things that you experience along the path and along your journey, but there is also the grace aspect. I'm open to being educated with all of you. And I believe we shouldn't sort of like be in our senses when we engage in conversation. Make sense or no, what's not making sense or no. And I would want to explain some of the things in detail so that you understand what you need no believe in grace. Why do I say so? If you don't believe in grace, and then you tell me and you tell us why you don't believe in that, and you let us know what you believe in. And perhaps you'll be as articulate as I am doing in explaining some of the things to us, so that we sort of like, iron sharpens iron. We rob with each other's wisdom, so that I get to understand your perspective of life. You get to understanding my perspective of life. But over it all, we emerge bigger, better, and we become better in this journey of life. So for now, I'll end here. But I'm waiting to hear from you guys, from the things that I've shared. Okay? What makes sense to you? What stood out to become the most pertinent things from the things that I've shared? So thank you for your time. Thank you for tuning in. Looking forward to having you on the next video. For now, I just want to know what stood out, and should you have anything closely aligned to everything that I've shared that you want to share with us, feel free to drop a comment in the comment section. For now, thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day.